Thank you for joining me. I want to talk a little bit today about some of the incentives that exist in business and how those incentives impact the ethical decision making of business persons. So, for starters, there are incentives that are built into uh, in capitalist economies that are built into businesses. Those incentives include especially the incentive to make money for the owners of the business. And often this is an incentive that moves in the direction of ethical malfeasance. So if the shareholders are exerting strong pressure on management to improve profit margins, management will be incentivized to do things that might undermine product safety or that might um, undermine product quality or that might do some other thing that is ethically questionable that cuts corners, as it were. I'm not saying that all the time owner incentives and the desire of owners to make money causes business persons to make unethical decisions, but it is a steadily occurring factor that does incentivize wrongdoing. At the same time, there are other pressures that tend in business to promote good ethics. An example of this is social pressure, and that social pressure might come from customers who exert pressure upon companies to, let's just stick with product quality and product safety, to produce products that have high levels of quality and safety. And the usual way in which customers telegraph, as it were, their opinions about companies to those companies is by voting with their feet and just by virtue of what they are willing to buy. And if customers uh, are willing to pay top dollar for the products of a company that has good product reputation and that has is well known for treating its customers well, that sends a signal to management and it incentivizes management to continue to run the company in ways that put customers first or that treat the clientele of the company with decency and respect, treat persons with respect, as it were. Another incentive that tends, on balance, not always, but it does tend to promote good ethics, is the existence of ethical referees in capitalist markets. In the United States, for better or for worse, the referee these days in the business world tends to be the government, and the government has certain regulations, and these regulations are well known among most companies, assuming that they've done their due diligence. And to the extent that they comply with these regulations, they do well by from the government's perspective. To the extent that they do not, they might be subject to litigation or other punitive penalties, fines, whatever the case may be. The point is that the government and the existence of a referee in business tends to incentivize good ethics. It tends to be a kind of an influence that serves as a hard backstop, as it were, that promotes good ethical decision making on the part of management. At the same time, though, governmental regulations are not especially successful when they are very minute or very granular. Rather, they tend to be more successful as regulations when they are general purpose in their scope. For this reason, governmental regulations don't tend to focus the law tends to be written in a general way. It doesn't tend to focus on each individual case that might arise. And so the law can at best serve as kind of an outer bound for the ethics of companies. There are lots of things that companies do that are wrong that might not be punished by the law. There are lots of things that the law prohibits that companies don't even come near to committing. So it might be best to think of government regulations, although they do serve as a good incentive most of the time for good ethics, it might be best to think of them as being at most simply outer boundaries, which most companies, if they're behaving properly, don't really even come close to, and which, uh, the, although it's present in the minds of executives, is not something that they have to immediately deal with in the course of their ethical decision making. So there we have it, three incentives, examples of incentives. There are many others that tend to push the ethics of management in this direction or that direction. But these are three examples of incentives that tend to influence for good or for ill the desires of owners, shareholders, or private equity owners to make profits, often, although not always, push companies in unethical directions, and at the same time, the reputational pressures exerted upon companies by customers and also the compliance pressures exerted upon companies by government tend to push in the opposite direction and to promote good ethics at the same time.